Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this presentation today on Requisition Center Best Practices. It's the first of our day of Procure to Pay spectacular webinars. We hope you enjoy them. We have a wonderful presenter today. Very excited to see her debut here on our live webinars. But first, I have a few housekeeping items. In the interest of keeping to the allotted time, all attendees are in listen-only mode. However, if you have questions, please type them into the GoToMeeting chat or questions box, and we will ask them as we have time or towards the end. Second, we have a live broadcast. You should be able to toggle the video and the PowerPoint to your liking. Third, and I'll try to say this very clearly because we always get the question, we are recording this presentation. It takes us a couple days to get it edited, formatted, and up online. And once we do, you'll get a link and you'll be able to share that with your colleagues. About to hand off here to our presenter today, Ms. Stephanie Kowal. Before I do, real quick about our PI. For those of you that don't know us, we are a Lawson professional services firm. We've been in business since 1999. We have consultants with expertise that run the gamut of the entire Lawson functional and technical areas, and we're fortunate to have a lot of really talented people that know the different areas of Lawson really well. And with us today, we have one of our senior procurement consultants who knows the RQC inside and out, Ms. Stephanie Kowal. Very excited to see her today. Big chair.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be going through RQC best practices. We're going to start off with the overview, then go through a typical project approach, give you some implementation considerations, go through some of these best practices. We'll also focus a little bit on punch out, and also go through some new features that come with version 10. So why implement electronic requisitions? So really you want to increase the efficiency of your areas and create some visibility around what's being ordered and by whom. You also want to standardize how these recs are coming in, how they're being processed, consolidate those requisitions together onto one purchase order or limited purchase orders as you can, and decrease that buyer workload. So those items that are already approved, have that right price, have that right item number, those are just issuing automatically to the vendor, as opposed to some of the specials where you don't have to spend or write contract pricing. You really want the buyers to focus on that, so this will definitely assist with that. And then you really want those electronic approvals, as opposed to having that paper that is handed along the chain and gets lost. So having that electronic approval process. And then you have your user-friendly interface. So this is the newer version 10 theme. If some of you are using RQC today, you may have the older version, 9, which has a little bit more blue. So this is definitely very helpful to switch this theme if you're already using RQC before you go live with version 10. It can warm up a lot of your requesters. So what cool stuff can you do with RQC? So there's many different ways that you can request goods. You can order off of a list, which is also called a shopping template. So these are products that you may have in a closet. It makes it nice and easy for you to order off this list instead of searching for each and every item. However, if you don't know the item that you're looking for, there's also an option for catalog search. You can search by description, by manufacturer number, by vendor number. If you have GTINs added or NDC codes added, you can also search by those. If you have unspec codes built in your item master, you also can search by category. There is an express ordering option available. So you can just order off of memory if you know the MMIS number that's added in your item master. And then there's also the special and service capability. So this is any kind of item that isn't in your catalog. And then you also can interface with vendor e-commerce websites, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So utilizing the vendor's website to order the goods that you're looking for. So many different options. So here's the typical project approach. So really, to focus first, you need to gather those requirements. So bring all your stakeholders together, define your business needs, figure out what kind of approval structure you need. If you already have one built in your HR system, one that's already being utilized, so you can figure that out. Decide what your auditing concerns are. So what type of things do you need to look out for? What do you want your requesters to see and not see? And then you need to work on your build, decide what type of approval workflow that you want, build that security, build those items in your item master, test, make sure everything's working the right way and going to the right person for approval. Then focus on training, communicating to your organization, making sure everyone knows how to place that requisition and that your buyers know how to process the order, and then making sure you have a very good support plan moving forward. So we'll talk a lot about these in the next upcoming slides. So implementation considerations. So again, bringing those stakeholders together in a room, get that whiteboard behind you, talk through every single type of requisition, and really focus on the roles and responsibilities, not the people that are doing these tasks. So try to standardize everything as much as you can. And then see if there's differences of the types of goods that are being ordered. So for inventory products, they're already pre-approved products, you have the low cost, they're in your inventory. Maybe those products you don't feel like you need approvals for. So, just have those fly right through the system. And for non-stocks, maybe it's just only a certain dollar amount. If the requisition exceeds, $2,000, that's when you want someone to approve it. And then specials, you may decide every single special, no matter who's ordering it, you want that to go through approval. So those are the decisions that you need to make, right when you're starting to decide how you want to implement RQC. And then you also need to focus on user access. So some organizations will choose that they want you to log into the portal, which soon will be Mingle for some of you, as opposed to just a direct link, so going through your intranet site and then just clicking a link and going directly into RQC. And then also thinking about requesters that you may have that are logging in from home. How are they going to access RQC if they need to, or if they need to approve some requisitions and didn't have the opportunity during the day, how are they going to approve when they're home at night? So are you using Citrix? Is there any browser issues that they're experiencing? So making sure you think of these things and test them prior to going live. Then there's shopping templates. We'll talk about this more in some of the later slides, but this can be very helpful for some organizations that don't want to give their requesters full access to search their catalog. So pre-building some of these shopping lists, these items that they regularly order, and only giving them access to order off those templates. If they want to add new items afterwards, they can contact their buyer or someone in purchasing who will add it to their template for them. So many different ways to go about it. And then another thing to consider is your RQC licenses. These are additional, they do need to be maintained, so making sure that you have a process, a cleanup process, so requesters that are no longer using the system to inactivate them, and just making sure you keep that as accurate as possible. So this is a little bit more about managing approvals. So again, really making sure that you understand what your organization wants to get out of this. What do you need? What types of approvals? What dollar amounts? Who are these users that need to approve these requisitions? You can utilize process automation to have this route properly. They can be very easy to create and easy to customize. They also can be very complex and time consuming. It's just whatever works for you, but there's a lot of different tools that are available. You can choose to have approvals be by each line of the requisition or as the requisition as a whole. Typically, header is the way to go. It's less time consuming, and it's usually an option of unrelease, approve, or reject. So if there's something wrong with the requisition, the approver wants it to go back to the requester, they hit unrelease and it goes back into their queue. There's also some things that you can leverage without having IPA using RQO2. And then PO codes are really your friends. So these different types of requisitions, you want them to route to purchasing in a different way. So what I mean here is maybe you have capital requisitions, and those are handled by a totally different process, go through a different approval workflow. So how do you tell the system to only route those particular requisitions to this approval flow? You can utilize those PO codes. They're very consistent, and you can use links to have it always default that PO code. So just some things to think about. And then here are some examples of documentation that would be created as part of your requirements gathering and build. So just making sure you flow everything out, try to think of everything, and involve everyone from the procure to pay process. Get everyone's input. And then using IPA, you can have these customized emails to assist with the approval process. And this also can integrate with your in-basket approvals. So here, you can make it as detailed as you want, with all the requester information, what department they're ordering for, if they have any special notes, each line of the requisition, what account it's being charged to and for how much. And then also you can use a message history, which is basically, if this requisition went up 3 levels and it's in the third person's waiting for their approval, it will show the 2 people before that approved it and when they approved it. And then as you can see here in the screenshot, you can utilize these buttons to take that in-basket action for you. So here we have approve, unrelease, reject, and in this particular scenario, there is an escalate button. So in this option here, if I was the second approver, and it was going up to the 3rd level, I could choose to escalate it to have it automatically go to that next person because I wasn't going to touch it. So just a lot of different options here, and this is definitely an enhancement for the approver. With these in-basket actions, you only can do it when you are on your own network. So again, something to take into consideration. If the approver is logging in from home and just going to the regular web address and they try to take this action, it's not going to work. But if they're on Go to My PC or they log in through Citrix, then they would be able to take this action without a problem. So configuration is pretty straightforward. You can set up these requesters. You can do that in the upload, making sure all your requesting locations are very consistent, especially if you came from a paper process before and you aren't using RQC today. And then the requester ID is tied to the Lawson user ID and Lawson security. And then there's some flags within your IC company, your IC01, to define as a company level of what the requesters will have access to. You also can override that in RQO4, which we'll get into a little bit later with punch-out. So improving the requester experience. So leveraging those templates. So a lot of different organizations will actually pull all of the history from all these different locations and pre-build these PO25 templates for them. So prior to going live, they already have this list of items because they're not already familiar with the Lawson item number. So how are they going to search for these products? And then really making sure that these templates are assigned to these different locations and companies. Enabling your search. So in IC005, there's also some setup for keywords. So what types of things are they going to search for in RQC that you want to let the system connect those things? So manufacturer number, for example. You'll need to turn that on so they can type in that manufacturer number and it will pull up that product for them. If you're starting to use GTINs, you'll have to make sure that you turn on that keyword. And then moving forward with version 10, since there's a new item description 3, which Brittany will get into at 1 o'clock if you're joining, you'll have to turn that on here for the keyword. So it's not going to be something that you search for automatically as you start to load these. So go into your IC005 and turn that on. There's also IC32 synonyms. So there's a lot of hang-ups here with clinical areas not liking the item master description from purchasing, but it is a purchasing system, so you need to place that order with the vendor. So how do you kind of find that happy medium? So keywords is a good way to make it a little easier for those requesters. Also, since before the item description 3, you needed to summarize a lot of these descriptions. So for catheter, you have cath instead. So you'll want to utilize those keywords to connect those two. So if they were to type in catheter, it's going to pull up items that have cath in the description. Okay. You also can utilize those generic names to search for as well. So if you have those built, something to look into. Deliver rich content, so loading item images. This is very exciting that Lawson has this capability. You either can choose to use a hyperlink from the vendor as your attachment. The only thing you have to remember there is if they change their web address, change their picture, it may not connect anymore. Or you can actually download these to your server and connect them. So this definitely enhances the requester experience, will reduce some of the returns that you may have because the requester can actually see the product in front of them. So you always can just start with your stock products, go out in the warehouse, take pictures of them, make a project out of it. It's definitely worth the time investment. And then really make sure that your item descriptions are intuitive, that they're standardized, that they're clear, that your requesters know what they're going to be ordering. And then requisition status. So this is very exciting. We have a print screen of this a few slides away. So a lot of different organizations may be using RQC now, but aren't using requisition status. So this is a great way for requesters to find their own status of their requisition without having to call purchasing, so they can drill around. So we'll show that soon. And then customizing your RQC config file to remove or require fields. So what's your RQC config file? So very nerdy here, lots of different things going on. But here's where you can edit your theme. So if you're on version 9 and you want to update to the newest 10, you can do that while you're still on 9. It enhances a lot of the error messages that your requesters may be experiencing. It just looks a lot cleaner. So here's where you can customize removing, requiring fields. You also, if you're a multi-company organization, here's where you can allow the requester a drop-down for company, or limit that if you so choose to. And then there's also additional capability for specials. So there's a special item validation. So there's skip, warn, or deny. Definitely wouldn't recommend skipping. I would either go with warn or deny. Warn's usually the normal one everyone goes with. And this basically means if they're in special service in RQC, and they type in item number that's already built in the item master, it's going to warn them. It's going to say, hey, here are the items that actually match this manufacturer number. Would you like to order these instead? And it will give them the option to add it to their requisition line cart. And then there's also the ability for confirmation of deletes. So some people are using this now. It just basically means if they delete something out of their requisition lines, it's going to go, are you sure? So it doesn't delete it right away. And then there's some different things that you can do with printing. So you either can choose that it opens up a HTML window or a PDF. So again, something to test out, especially if you're using a Citrix connection, to make sure that these PDFs are loading. So here's an example of that requisition status. When you first open it up, it's just this top area. And then here's the line item detail. So you actually can click on one of these. And then here at the bottom, you'll see those products. So here, if a purchase order number has been generated, it will show for you. And also on the right-hand side, it's actually an org chart, but it looks like a stack of blocks. If you were to hover your mouse over that, it will tell you where it's at in the approval process. So very exciting. If you use any kind of purchase order comments, you also, anything that has that blue hyperlink, you can click on it. It will give you more detail drilling into PO20. So again, going back to security, making sure that these requesters are seeing what you want them to see. All right, training. Everyone learns differently, so very important to have as much documentation, as many different sources of training that you can possibly have. So have your 2-page job aids, have your full manuals, record a session, have it on YouTube, send it out to your requesters, retrain, do as much as you can. Really, everyone learns differently. Put some posters out in your area, emails, any kind of news alerts to keep everyone informed if there's any changes, updates. And then your metrics. How do you keep track of everything that's going on? Especially in some of these scenarios, you may choose that you want them to send directly out to the vendor. So, how do you keep track of everything? So those are just a couple of examples of some reports that you can use. So number of requisitions processed that day. Approval processing time. So how long did it take the approver to approve these requisitions? The percent of rejected requisitions. The number of unreleased requisitions that you may have out there waiting in queue. So a requester started a rec, left their desk, totally forgot about it, and the next time they logged in, they created a brand new rec. Those unreleased recs are just sitting out there. Last process requisition by requester. So this could be very helpful for auditing these requesters. So how often are they using the system? Should you inactivate them? Is there now a new requester in the system that's ordering for that department? Then the number of requesters per account unit. So this department, they may have 20 requesters, while this one just has 1. You may need to handle that department a little bit differently when you're doing training. Special item purchase volume. So this is very important. So some of these items that may be ordered, let's say 10 times in 3 months, you may choose that item should really have an item master and add it to that template and purchase a little bit differently. And then also average requisition value. So do you need to relook at your approval levels? Does something need to change with your workflow to accommodate this, this average requisition value? And then we have punch out. So here, Richard Stout's gonna join in.
Hi, thanks, Stephanie. This is one of my favorite topics. It is a great way to get more spend on contract, more spend on PO, and more spend submitted for approval up front.
Absolutely. So it's pretty easy to implement. Usually can just take about a month's time, and Infor actually has a pre-approved list of vendors that you can work with.
There may be 30-some vendors that are commonly used with punch-out. These are vendors that have many customers running Lawson and should be easy to implement.
Absolutely. It does require some additional setup within that RQC config file that we just went into. Also some setup in your ED tables and RQ04. So this does have a separate licensing fee,
yes.
But you can limit who's using it. So if you only want certain requesters to have access to Granger, you can only set up those requesters. You build them in those ED tables and turn the flag on in RQ04.
Yes, I mean, this is a great way to improve compliance to purchasing policy, as well as reduce the burden on master data maintenance. The way that punch out works, you start in RQC, you'll punch out to a vendor's website. So that allows a requester to do shopping on a regular vendor website. It's usually a custom portal that has your negotiated pricing shown. And when they go to check out, rather than entering a credit card and a shipping address, the items they selected are are going to flow back into RQC as requisition lines. They'll come in as X-type items, but they have all of the data that the vendor can provide. So we're talking about the vendor item number, manufacturer info, an accurate price and unit of measure, right, to reduce matching errors. And we also have the ability to bring in extra bonus data fields like unspec code, like a G10, all sorts of great data that you can collect from the vendor and use for reporting later on.
Yes, very exciting, very consistent. The only thing that you really need to take into consideration is your GL data, right?
Right. And Punchout can even handle that as well. Maybe if your requesters have trouble differentiating between an office supply and an IT item, why don't we just tell the vendor what our GL accounts are for these items and have that flow in? So that's possible as well. The vendor can send back your GL accounting string with the item, so the requester won't have the opportunity to make any mistakes.
Exactly. And most importantly, this is going back into RQC before it goes to the vendor, so it's using that approval workflow that you've defined and going through purchasing to view as well. And
it's
Brittany,
not in order until it's approved.
Yes, exactly. And with version 10, which Brittany will be going through at 1 o'clock, there's also some additional functionality in PO 100. So for these particular requisitions that came from Punchout, you may not want the buyer to look at them because it's already a pre-approved price. It's good to go. So send it directly to the vendor so you actually can pull those out.
Cool.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Now it's time to get funky.
Yes, time to get funky. So there's always very interesting things that can happen. Unknown, they're not in a manual. They could be very specific to your organization. So these are just some things to look out for and make sure that you test and you're prepared for them. So multi-company distribution on RQ04. So again, something new that's coming with 10 that will be talked about at 1 o'clock. But there are some new fields now from company on RQ04. So unfortunately, they are still display only, so you still need to set up these company and account unit structures within the RQ account unit table. So you may still get some errors. It's basically going off the default company in RQ04. Unreleased agreements, your PO25, these can cause requisition errors with pricing, so something to look out for. If you don't already view a report to see what kind of unreleased agreements you have out there, definitely recommend having that on some kind of dashboard or daily view, hourly view. Any kind of deleted, unreleased requisitions in RQ10. So some organizations will actually have a cleanup process. So, each month they'll actually delete unreleased requisitions in RQ10. This can cause requisition errors for the requester. So the next time they log in, it's going to be referring to that requisition that was deleted. So you actually need to work with your DBA to delete those files. Another thing to take into consideration for security is all of these invoke programs. So there's actually a knowledge base article out there on this, but your RQIX, RQIC, all those different tables that RQC is pulling from to get this information. If your requester security class doesn't have these, your requester is going to run into errors. So you definitely want to make sure that's cleaned up, and also if you're going to utilize Punchout, it will need access to some of those ED tables for those requesters. And then something to take into consideration as well is RQC has its own separate cache refresh. So if you make any kind of security updates or rebuild any files, you'll definitely want to run this cache refresh. And then some version 10 updates. So there's some very exciting bill-only support, which I'll be featuring in Brittany's presentation at 1 o'clock. It does require some setup in PO 1.5. And you also need to assign access by requester in RQ04. So you don't need to give everyone access, just those particular departments that are processing these bill-only requisitions. So more on that at 1 o'clock. And as I mentioned earlier, there's now multi-company distribution distribution on RQ04, so very helpful to have that viewed in one screen. And then there's also a RQC to PO contextual application. So this is very exciting. It basically will show you everything from the rec to check process when you're in some of these screens. So this is a screenshot of PO20, and then here you can see the requisition information, who the requester is, what the rec number is, has purchase order detail, receiving and delivery, invoice, and payment. So these are actually live links. So if I were to click on this requisition number in this contextual application, it will open up RQ10. So very helpful for the buyer, especially when they're trying to figure out what's going on with the purchase order. And here's just a screen print of the RQ04 with the added distribution company. So again, it's just display, but it is very helpful. And then also with version 10, there's now a new theme available for this home view. So it basically shows you any kind of templates you have as a requester, any punch-out vendors that you have, your most recent requisitions, and all of your requisition statuses. So very helpful new addition in version 10. So that's all we have today. I really appreciate everyone joining in. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope that you'll be joining us at 1 o'clock. Thank you.